Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. During tonight's discussion, you'll have a chance to learn about the Knowles Teaching Fellows program and hear firsthand accounts of how it has positively impacted the teaching practice of 3 Knowles Fellows. Before we get started, I'd like to mention a few housekeeping items. Video and audio are turned off for all participants. As such, I encourage you to use the Q&A box on your screen to ask any questions you might have. All questions will be answered during the Q&A session at the end of the panel. My name's Shannon Morey, and I'm excited to serve as your host tonight. I joined the Knowles community as part of the 2015 cohort and are now a senior fellow, which means I successfully completed the 5-year program. I'm in my 10th year of teaching. For the last 7 years, I've been teaching physics at Abbott Lawrence Academy in Lawrence, Massachusetts. In addition to my teaching responsibilities, I serve as a student government advisor, member of our school's instructional leadership team, and the director of education for the science education nonprofit Bite Size. I'm also a member of the Knowles Engineering Leadership Team and a member of the course design team for the Knowles Academy Engineering course. I'd also like to introduce my co-presenter, Jen Mosgrove, Director of Teaching Fellows Program at Knowles. Jen started her career teaching 6th grade math in Maryland, then went on to complete graduate studies in education, where she focused on supporting beginning teachers across K-12 mathematics education. She's been supporting new high school math and science teachers at Knowles for the last 17 years. Next, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Gail Gallagher is a Knowles Senior Fellow from the 2018 cohort. She taught science, most recently at Odyssey STEM Academy in Lakewood, California. She now works as a community manager for Community Share, an education nonprofit that co-creates vibrant learning ecosystems that activate young people, educators, and realize individual and community potential. She also tutors middle school through adult students in both science and math. Sharon Nickerson is a 2021 Knowles Senior Fellow. She's a 4th-year math teacher currently at Senn High School in Chicago, Illinois. At Senn, Ciara is on the PPLC, where she advocates for instructional support for teachers at her school. Additionally, she is a math team lead. Last, we have Satoshi Suga, who is a Knowles Senior Fellow from the 2018 cohort. He's in his 6th year of teaching. This year, he teaches engineering design and development on a part-time basis and coaches new teachers and organizes events that support the culture and climate of the school at McClemens High School in Oakland, California. With a background in electrical engineering, he hosts the robotics competition for the Bay Area at the school. In addition to teaching, he started up a company called Trusted Network of Teachers, an organization dedicated to supporting public school teachers to earn additional income from offering personalized academic coaching for families. To begin, Jen will give a brief overview of Knowles, as well as the Teaching Fellows program and how to apply.
Thank you. So let's begin with an overview of the Knowles Teaching Fellowship program. While new teachers are going through your certification or licensure program, they are often surrounded by a cohort of other new teachers. You might have dedicated mentors that are with you in your classrooms almost all of the time. And in addition, because you're usually connected to college campuses, they often have access to a lot of different resources, including journals, experts, classroom materials. And the first few years of teaching then can often be really jarring for new teachers, as this support is somewhat removed. They have a sense of isolation as they navigate their new school environment. And mentoring programs in some cases aren't as supportive or comprehensive as they really need to be to support new teachers. And schools aren't always able to provide the intellectual resources through professional development or the physical classroom materials that new teachers need to be able to enact that vision of teaching in their classroom that they want. And while they're attempting to learn a challenging new profession, they find themselves under-resourced. The Knowles Teaching Fellowship was designed specifically to address some of the challenges faced by new high school math and science teachers to help them thrive as new teachers and become teacher leaders who are able to support other teachers and improve math and science education for all students. The Knowles Teacher Initiative was established by Janet H. and C. Harry Knowles in 1999 to increase the number of high-quality high school science and math teachers and ultimately to improve math and science education in the United States. At Knowles, we believe that teachers can and should be the primary agents of educational improvement. This belief is woven throughout all aspects of the Foundation's programming. including our Teaching Fellows program, which we're going to discuss today. The Knowles Teaching Program is an intensive and cohesive 5-year program that supports early career, secondary math and science teachers in their efforts to develop teaching expertise and lead from the classroom. Each year, we award approximately 35 fellowships to new math and science teachers who have outstanding content knowledge in math or science, who are committed to becoming great teachers, and possess the potential to become the kind of teacher leaders who make a difference in school. 3 key development threads run through all 5 years of the Teaching Fellows program: collaborative inquiry, equitable teaching practices, and teacher leadership. We do this all while creating and engaging in a learning community. Next, I'll provide a brief overview of the fellowship benefits. Knowles teachers receive a comprehensive array of benefits that are designed to support new teachers and emerging teacher leaders. These benefits include financial support, mentoring and coaching, and membership into a nationwide community of peers. The Knowles Teacher Initiative supports fellows financially by offering grants to cover expenses associated with purchasing classroom materials and engaging in professional development. Additionally, fellows are eligible to request funds to develop and execute leadership activities that have an impact beyond their own classroom. In addition to the grants, fellows are eligible to receive stipends. We recognize that our fellows are highly accomplished and often have made sacrifices both in money spent on teacher preparation and in opportunity costs incurred by choosing potentially a lower paying profession. These stipends allow them to reduce debts that they may have incurred and reduce the financial burden that teachers often bear, both of which are factors that contribute to sustainability in the profession. Alternatively, stipends can be used to support fellows financially during summer months, allowing them to concentrate on reflecting on the past year, preparing for the coming year, and engaging in professional development, rather than taking on a part-time job that summer that as many teachers might need to do. In total, fellows are able to access more than $50,000 in financial support over the 5 years of the fellowship. And the various grants and stipends, though, are subject to board approval on an annual basis. We value the expertise and knowledge of skillful teachers, which is why we support our fellows with mentors and coaches. In fact, we recruit staff with significant teaching experience to support our fellows. Our experienced Teaching Fellows staff with over 100 years of combined teaching experience view themselves first and foremost as teachers. Our staff regularly check in with fellows, support them to plan and reflect on instruction, talk them through challenging professional dilemmas, and support them through personal challenges. Staff observe fellows teach, either virtually or in person, and coach them into improvement in a way that the fellow needs and directs. In addition to staff, each team supports fellows with 2 or 3 veteran teachers, most of whom have each over 20 years of experience as both teachers and teacher leaders. These team specialists bring the on-the-ground experience and credibility. They attend meetings, support fellows in their inquiry, and provide counsel as true master teachers. Next, we'll discuss eligibility. We are currently seeking applicants for our 2024 Teaching Fellowship. Prospective applicants must meet the following eligibility requirements. The fellowship seeks to support individuals who intend to make teaching their primary career. In order to be eligible for the fellowship, applicants must have recent knowledge of the content that they intend to teach. Specifically, applicants must have earned a related degree between 2014 and September 1st, 2024. Additionally, applicants must have earned a secondary certification somewhere between January 1st, 2019 and September 1st, 2024, with a goal of teaching full-time in a high school science or math classroom no later than the fall of 2024. Last, the fellowship is intended to support teachers who are first, second, or third year teachers during their first year of the fellowship, And for the purpose of eligibility, we consider an applicant's first year of teaching to be the first year in which they teach full-time for the full academic year as a teacher of record. And we recognize that even with these specific criteria, it's certainly possible that you'll have specific questions about your situation. And if you have those questions regarding your own eligibility, you can send your inquiry to apply@knowlesteachers.org, and we'll be sure to respond quickly. And we'll have that up later as well. Last, I'll briefly highlight how to start the application process. To be considered for a 2024 Knowles Teaching Fellowship, applicants must submit an online application in the application round, submit short answers to 6 questions in the quarterfinalist round, participate in an individual interview if moving on to the semifinalist round, and submit 2 reference forms and participate in group interviews in the finalist round. In the application round, applications must submit unofficial transcripts from all college coursework, any teaching certifications held, a resume, and a short answer response to 1 question in one of the 5 application windows. Our online application is quick and easy. In less than 15 minutes, you can upload the required items and submit your application. An applicant may select one of the remaining application windows. Applicants are encouraged to submit their application as soon as possible to gain early access to the 6 short answer questions that will be shared in the quarterfinalist round. Responses to those questions are due by January 16th, 2024, regardless of the application window selected. Shannon, back to you.
Thank you, Jen, for providing an overview of the fellowship, including eligibility requirements and the application process. Next, we'll move into our panel discussion. As we described in the overview, Knowles selects teaching fellows and cohorts. In what ways has your cohort been important to your experience as a fellow? I'll direct this question to the 2 fellows on the panel who are in the same cohort, Gail and Satoshi. Gail, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah, my cohort has been so important to me as a Knowles Fellow in a bunch of different ways. And I think one of the things that I go back to is that this is a consistent group of teachers that I come to trust, I come to rely on throughout my years as a teacher. So they know where I've been, they know where my goals are, and they're all along the way to help me out. So that might look like being a critical friend for some sort of data that I bring to my classroom. That looks like giving me advice on a specific problem that I'm facing, and then just being there for me, through all of the ups and downs of my teaching experience.
Yeah, I can add to that. I think, if you've gone through a typical teacher program, you're basically drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot that's going on. And I think what's been great about Knowles is that over the course of 5 years, you get to kind of really take in all those things that you learn in teacher education and then more to really improve your practice. And I think there's a lot of intentionality around making sure that you are supported. And, we know that teaching could be very lonely, even at a big school or a small school. And so having that cohort to always come back to and to talk about these things. And it's really nice because your cohort remembers your stories, right? They aren't your friends that you just go complain to. It's just no, what happened with that? And then you can really dive in and talk about these things that, you don't really get to do with your friends who don't really understand education that way. And so that was really valuable for me in feeling that I was really just kind of, I felt like part of this bigger, kind of picture in the country, right? I think we usually silo ourselves in thinking for me in Oakland, I'm just teaching in Oakland, but then to hear all these different stories that are very common and similar in other parts of the country was also very, very enlightening.
So each year, teaching fellows write grants to access Knowles funding for professional development and classroom materials. Can you tell us about a grant you submitted and how the benefit you access impact your teaching practice? I'd like to direct this question to all the panelists. Sierra, would you be able to start?
Yeah, so I can start. So I'm actually calling in right now from a tablet that I got with Knowles funds a little bit earlier in the school year. And I was basically trying to use this tablet to help my teaching. So I'm doing things like using it for collection of data for like my different assessments that I'm having students do. I use it to teach from it. Like I have a whiteboard put up that's projected on the screen, and I use it to instruct my classes. So this is just like one example. I've also used Knowles funds for doing an immersion program. So last summer I got to go on a 3-week immersion experience in Puebla, Mexico, where I got to take Spanish classes. I have a very large population of Spanish speaking students, and quite a few of them are Spanish only speaking students. And so one of the things I think I struggled with my first year in person was trying to navigate teaching with those students. And so part of my Knowles funds that I used was to go down to Mexico to do an immersion program to learn Spanish so that I can like adequately help my students in the best possible way. So like those are some of the things. I've also gotten things like calculators for my room, things like whiteboards for my room. The Knowles funds are very helpful when it comes to like being able to replenish your classroom with things that you feel like are going to support your teaching, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Satoshi, would you be able to go next?
So I love traveling. And like when you get a teacher salary, you don't have a lot of expendable income. And so I definitely use those funds to be able to support my interest in traveling, but also, of course, my professional development. So last year, actually, I applied to go to the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador. It was a PD for science and math teachers, and it was about a 15 group cohort, all from different years. Actually, it was a really nice way to like meet other people across cohorts. And we spent a week plus in the Galapagos Islands, hopping around different islands and doing a lot of interesting, it's not necessarily research. I think it's like methodologies that they gather data that make science really authentic. And it was there that I really kind of realized this. So I teach physics, but I was like, wow, like, why didn't I do environmental science? Because this is so cool. And, I think like it's more salient for my students because it's like the environment is something that's way more tangible and affects them every day, as opposed to, physics, which is a little bit more cerebral and a little bit, like hard to grasp for some of my students. And so it kind of opened up my eyes to thinking about like, how do I involve environmental science into my physics classroom, and thinking about the way that I do my lesson plans. And so that was really, really great. And then that actually turned into an opportunity to partner with somebody who works in the Amazon forest. And so this year, I actually, through her connection, was able to do another 2-week trip into the Amazon forest or rainforest. And so, yeah, and even if that wasn't directly related to Knowles, like that indirectly led to these great opportunities. And so it's really, really nice to have these funds.
Wow, that's awesome. Gail, is there something that you can talk about?
Yeah, so as the others have highlighted and Shannon mentioned, you can use your professional development money for a combination of materials and I have seen them used for all sorts of different things because everybody has different needs and so you can really personalize it. But one of the actually most personalized things that I used my funds for was getting a Knowles coach. And this is a really cool opportunity where if say that you have a specific thing that you want to work on, or even just a general sense that you want to continue improving your teaching in between Knowles meetings. I actually first applied for a Knowles coach in spring 2020 when my school had just moved online, and there wasn't a lot of traditional professional development happening, but our professional learning needs were really high. I needed to figure out how to adapt what I was doing to this new context. And so I applied for a Knowles coach and used my Knowles funding for that. And what was awesome is, well, a couple things were awesome. My Knowles coach was actually himself a senior fellow who had gone through coaching training, but had also gone through the Knowles Fellowship. And so he was able to use some of the same practices that we use in Knowles to coach me in the specific distance learning challenges that I was facing. And then I actually I submitted another coaching grant the following year and ended up using that one to focus on my grading practices. So I was doing competency-based grading, and I was looking for ways to make that a stronger practice and more sustainable for me. So that was a really incredible grant because I was able to really focus on whatever I wanted to focus on and get a series of sessions with an expert teacher who could really help me get better at those specific things.
That's awesome. I also do want to highlight some grant opportunities that I've experienced. One that I really appreciate was kind of being able to design my own professional development with a colleague. And so we wanted to develop engineering projects. And so Knowles paid for us to be able to get together and all the materials. I also did the Knowles Engineering Professional Development through the Knowles Academy. And that was, all of those things have been really influential to my practice. And now that's led me to be able to become part of the Knowles Engineering Leadership Team and part of the Knowles Academy course design team for our engineering course. So it has these kind of small things end up having a big impact, which is really awesome. All right. So Knowles also invents quite a bit to bring fellows together 3 times a year, once in the summer and twice during the school year. How have those meetings furthered your growth as a teacher? Can you talk about a particular meeting you'd like to highlight? I'm going to start directing this question to Gail.
So I actually want to answer this by tracing a thread through a couple of different meetings and showing how they built on each other. During our first year as Knowles Fellows, a lot of our professional learning focused on what does it mean to be a doer of math and science. And as a science teacher, we talked a lot about science practices, really trying to understand what does it mean to model and explain, to argue, to conduct experiments, and so forth. And that was so helpful for me for wrapping my mind around that in those first year meetings. And then my second year, I moved to a new school where we actually did completely competency-based grading. And so now suddenly my entire grading system is based on these science practices. And I'll be honest, if I hadn't had that first year of meetings, I wouldn't have even known what I was grading based on because I wouldn't have had that deeper understanding of these science practices. So my second year, I do a ton of work during the school year on that. And then I actually decided to, at the following summer conference is a time when all of the different cohorts come together. So you have years 0 through 5 of the fellowship, plus many senior fellows, plus staff members, hundreds of educators just really dedicated to learning together. And one of the things we do at those meetings is a poster session where people can talk about different projects that they've been working on inside the classroom, outside the classroom, that they want to share with other Knowles Fellows. And so that year I made a poster explaining the work that I had done in grading using the science practices and talked with a bunch of people at that meeting. And then there were further ripple effects. Like I think based on what I shared at that meeting, a couple of my other cohort members ended up trying competency-based grading. And, you know, one is like a department lead who's been doing competency grading with his whole science department now. So it's really cool that the way those meetings further our growth as teachers, but then build throughout the 5 years of the fellowship.
Satoshi or Ciara, is there something you'd like to add?
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, so Gail and I were actually in the same cohort, so I totally know what she's talking about. And I think, you know, kind of like building on that, the great thing is like, you know, whether we kind of want to or not, because of like who we are as teachers, like I think we just progress in the school to be teacher leaders very quickly. Like I think usually it takes a lot more to be like a senior teacher, but then after 3 years you're already like leading like departments or you're like in charge of something at school. And so I think, you know, the meetings, the way that they are like ordered from year 1 to 5, it really helps me. It helped me at least to be able to find support in as I found myself in these new roles. And I think especially these because there's so many people in your cohort, right? Everybody has different school contexts, and mine in particular, there's a lot going on at my school. It's a really hard school to teach at, but there are others that also have very similar contexts. And so it was great that at every meeting I was able to find somebody that I can always relate to and to be able to like commiserate and talk about these things. And especially in your last 2 years, we do this inquiry cycle that, you know, we want to focus on. And so it was great to be able to kind of pair up with those people and then really talk about those like things that aren't necessarily just directly, you know, teacher practices focused. We, at least for me, we did it on culture and climate. And that was an important piece because at our school, it feels like a prison. It feels very much like a very stoic, just like very banal, sad place. And so we're like, we need to build this for instruction, right? And then there was 2 other people in our cohort that was really also interested in that. And so it was great to be able to collaborate with them. And so, you know, again, like I think these meetings really offer a lot of flexibility. It's not just like a very prescribed and dedicated thing to just one thing, although there is a thread that we see. But I do appreciate that we can bring in our issues, and we can bring in our practice or things that we're trying to practice and get better at, and they're able to accommodate those things.
Sierra?
Yeah, it's just unmuting. So for me, I think the Knowles professional developments are one of the most energetic things that you can experience, especially as an early career teacher. Especially for me, the first 2 years, I found myself like really looking forward to these meetings. And so I'll go a little bit, I guess, and more into detail in that. So like by October, November, and you're having your first meeting, super tired just from the school year. Like I'm kind of burnt out. You know, I'm trying to navigate school life. I'm trying to navigate grading and all of the things that come with teaching once you get into the field and whatnot. And I'm going to these meetings and talking to all of my cohort members, and even talking to like previous year's cohort members, and even like the new people that are coming in. The amount of just like energy that exists like in the place is literally so incredibly uplifting that it like gets me until the end of the school year and when I can go on winter break. I come back from these meetings, I think knowing so much more about myself and knowing so much more about who I am as a teacher. I come back with so many resources. Um, I literally have an entire notebook of all of the ideas that I've collected in just the 2 full years that I've been a part of Knowles, that I've gained from other teachers. This most recent meeting that we had over the summer, um, we got to do these things called CWGs, so they're critical work groups, and I did not do it, but it was put on by my big buddy, and it was about building thinking classrooms. And going into this presentation that was put on by my big buddy about building thinking classrooms, after I had experiencing that, I went in this school year and completely overhauled the way that I teach, the way that I taught. I came back with a bunch of resources and people that I can like reach out to when I had questions. Um, there were specific experts that have been doing this. I think we talked about earlier about the coaching. I have a coach now that's helping me put BTC like in my classroom. And so for me, these professional developments are just super energetic because I think when I'm at a place where I'm like super tired, going in and then like feeling all of this energy and getting all of these ideas and being told by a bunch of other teachers who are in the same kind of position as you, and you see you're kind of all in this together, it just is very energizing for me. And so I very much look forward to my professional development. I think it's some of the best professional development I think I've experienced that has impacted my teaching career.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Knowles hires staff who are experienced teachers to work as coaches, mentors, and PD facilitators for the Knowles Fellows. The staff fellows work with have the title of program officers for teacher development, but everyone calls them TDs. Can you tell us about one of your TDs and how they've supported or influenced you?
Can I take this one?
Please.
Okay. Actually, I have 2 TDs, but I'm to keep it brief. When you get into Knowles, actually 3 TDs. The TDs are great. They're amazing. It's hard to choose, but I'm just going to talk about this one in particular, because I think it has been very impactful for me. So Ayana has been one of the most influential, I think, TDs to me. This is a person who I have reached out to even when it's like non-teaching related things. And I've been able to reach out to this person for support, moral support, mental support, spiritual support, all the supports. And I think one of the other things that when you go to the, just to, I guess, loop it back into the previous question with the professional developments, there's a practice of like reading a book to us at the end of the meeting that kind of helps ground us into like these goals that we should be setting for ourselves as we move into our practice and whatnot. And so Ayana, I think, has been one of the biggest supporters or biggest people on my support team. And that's somebody you'll get to meet once you are a fellow. So yeah, shout out to Ayana.
I can
Gail
go.
or- Thank you.
Was Jen a TD before she became the big boss? Okay, so Jen is my homegirl. So I think being queer and a teacher is something special. And I think I was able to connect with Jen, not just because Jen's an amazing person and just like so lovable, but also to be able to talk about like my past relationships and like, things that are going on that's at play while I'm a teacher, because that, we are more than just teachers, right? And so she really brings levity to like everything that we do, but also she knows when to get down and serious. And so I really appreciate her, and I am gonna miss seeing her every year, but I know where she lives. So I'm gonna hunt you down, Jen. We're gonna hang out, we're gonna go out.
I had a hard time just picking one TD. There's so many that I could talk about, but one in particular that I'm thinking about is Carolyn, who, so as Satoshi mentioned earlier, during your later years as a Knowles Fellow, you have kind of an inquiry project that you design yourself where you're looking into something particular in your practice. And you're doing this with a group, and you are also paired with an inquiry coach. And during my 4th year, Carolyn was my inquiry coach, and she was just so helpful in helping us think about what kinds of questions we wanted to ask, what kind of data we wanted to collect, emotional support, like the others have mentioned, helping us see new connections between what each of us was focusing on. And now she's a senior fellow TD, so I'm really excited that we still get to work with her.
Awesome. Thank you. So now this is a question I think that there's a lot of different answers to. So in what ways do you think being a Knowles Fellow has impacted your students? To begin, I'll take this over to Sierra.
So I mentioned earlier, so one of the ways I think has been the most impactful for me with Knowles, in terms of my teaching practice, I think goes back to that immersion trip that I took. I think one of my biggest insecurities my 2nd year teaching, which would have been my 1st year in person, because my 1st year was fully online. So my 1st year in person, one of my biggest insecurities was that I had a large population of students who I was not able to communicate with. So that made me feel bad, because I'm like, my job is to teach them, and I can't do that job if I can't speak their language, if I can't, communicate with them, if I can't even tell them like, oh, you're doing a good job, things like that. And while I had like a small background in Spanish, like I can greet, I can do all those things, I was not able to uphold the conversation. I could not tell a student like, here are some things that I noticed that you're doing wrong, and how do we correct them, and how do we move forward so that you can, learn. And being able to go on that immersion trip was incredibly helpful. Not that I learned a ton of Spanish in 3 weeks, but just my confidence alone, and being able to go into the space and be like, hey, I may not know all the words, but I'm going to struggle through it until we understand each other. And that is how I'm going to prove to you that I am worth being your teacher. And so I was really thankful that I was able to take advantage of that as an opportunity through the Knowles programs. And there's been tons of ways, but I think that was one of the ones that I think kind of hit one of my biggest insecurities, that I didn't feel adequate enough as a teacher. And being able to do that made me feel really good about being in the classroom, and especially having to educate my kids who didn't speak my language. And so I was like, then that's my responsibility to make sure that I can communicate with them in their language. So
Thank you. Satoshi, Gail, you have something to add?
Yeah. You know, like growing up in public education, especially in California, and then you become a teacher in California, you think, oh, I know how to teach. And turns out the way that I was learning in school probably wasn't the best. And so it's, like I think if I hadn't had Knowles as an experience to kind of like really reshape the way that I think about education and how I am really breaking some systems that we know are in place that are working against our students of color. So I teach at a primarily Black school, and I think the school to prison pipeline is real. It really is. And like how we use grades to kind of like punish students' behavior, and like how that pushes kids out of the classroom, and it starts this vicious cycle of them falling behind and then coming back and then acting out, then falling back. And like that, pointing those things out and like having a community to talk about those kind of things has been really impactful for me, because otherwise I would have been part of that system, like 100%. It's like, I'm not trying to say that I was going to be the perfect teacher. Like I definitely felt like that was the way that it was done. And so that's, the way I did it. And like, I turned out okay, but then it's like, oh wait, no, like it doesn't serve all our students. And so, and all the books that, Knowles makes you read, that's kidding. Now we get to read with Knowles. No, it's really been really helpful and eye-opening, and I think so those are really valuable experiences and things that I really appreciate, that I don't doubt that my students appreciate too.
Gail?
It sounds a little trite, but genuinely, I think that almost everything that I've done as a teacher has been woven in with Knowles. And so it's almost like anything that I do as a teacher that impacts my students is in some way I can trace the thread of how Knowles had an impact on that. So in that sense, Knowles has helped my students be more comfortable in my classroom, has helped me be more confident and comfortable in my classroom, has helped them learn more science, has changed systems at my school, has helped my school achieve its WASC accreditation, which is so that their diplomas mean something. Like really, there's all of these things that in my practice that I trace back to Knowles in one way or another.
Thank you. All right. Then kind of for our last formal question here, why do you think new teachers should apply for the Knowles Fellowship? Satoshi, do you mind starting this one off?
Yeah, why wouldn't you? It's like free money and like support for 5 years, like low key. And you get to, okay, first of all, something that I don't think they mentioned, like you get to fly out to like different parts of the country 3 times a year, get like miles and stuff, like all these things. There's like, I'm just being practical. Look, I'm like, I love Knowles for what it is, but also like there's so many other benefits just being part of it, right? And yeah, it's free money. It's like, why wouldn't you apply? Does it make sense? You should.
Awesome. Thank you, Sierra.
just along with that, when I am like telling like new teachers that I come across that are in math or science, and I'm like, oh my God, you should apply to Knowles, and here's the deadline and all the things, I have to tell them it's not a gimmick. Like there's nothing, there are no gotchas or no like, I can't think of the word right now, but I'm like, it's free money for one. It is free professional development. Like you're not paying for the professional development and they fly you out. That's like, I get to take 3 vacations, kind of. I mean, I'm doing work on these vacations, but I get to take a vacation nonetheless. And again, just the amount of relationships that you can build are just like priceless. So why join Knowles as a new teacher, if you, which inevitably will happen, if you at some point find yourself feeling lost or like unguided or like you need direction or you need support, and again, mentally, spiritually, physiologically, all the supports, Knowles has been something that has been so incredibly influential. And again, just to reiterate, the amount of people I had to tell, like, there's no catch. Just like, there's no catch to it. They will just give you money. Just go apply for it. I have to say that every time, because they're like, well, what's the catch? Because are you telling me they're going to give us this amount of money just because? I'm like, yeah, just because. So yeah, there are incredible amounts of benefits that are even outside of your teaching. I mean, I guess it does indirectly impact your teaching. Like if Knowles can prevent you, for example, from having to pick up a second job because they're willing to give you a summer stipend, you can spend that summer recouping from the previous year. You don't have to worry about whether or not you'll be able to pay for rent or pay for groceries or pay for bills and all the things. So it not only impacts your teaching, but it impacts your livelihood. And that is more than enough reason to apply to Knowles. It's such a very good experience to have, I think.
Thank you. Gail?
I completely agree with everything Satoshi and Sierra said, and they already highlighted a lot of things. Like there's the material benefits, there's the community of support so that you feel connected to people, people who know you through your entire journey, from beginning to being a more experienced teacher. Like that's priceless. But one thing that hasn't been mentioned that I think is really important is that new teachers should apply for a Knowles Fellowship because it helps you see not just a job in teaching, but a career in teaching, and how that can impact not just your classroom, but a bigger picture too. So if you're someone who's thinking, I want to be in education, I want to be a teacher, but I also want to have a bigger impact. Maybe I don't know how I'm going to have that impact yet, but that's something that I'm dreaming of doing that someday. Knowles is a program that will help you figure out what that looks like for you. And that's built in from year one. You're thinking about what is it, how, like my classroom, but then how does my classroom impact others, and larger systems and bigger changes in this country. And it's done in a way that feels really supportive and really natural as you progress in your career. And so if that resonates with you at all, this is the group of people that will have your back as you go through all of those different changes in your career. And speaking as someone, so I just finished year 5 of the fellowship. That's what it means to be a senior fellow. And my experience is still full of opportunities for the rest of my career to connect with these people, to access resources, to continue making an impact on education. So definitely the short-term benefits are real, but also if you're thinking about the long-term, this is a really incredible opportunity to set yourself up to actually make that difference.
Great, thank you. So at this time, we're going to move into the question and answer segment. So please take a moment to submit your questions via the Q&A panel.
This is us demonstrating our teacher wait time, but please do ask questions. We're happy to answer them.
I guess while people are thinking about their questions, is there anything that we didn't get a chance to talk to that you all wanted to add about the fellowship? While you think about that, we do have a question. which is I think is a really, really good one. What kind of work is required of Knowles Fellows during the school year? Are there assignments?
Is there anyone in particular you want to answer, or is just
Sierra, why don't you start since you're in the midst of it, and then maybe Gail or Satoshi can add on since they just wrapped up.
okay? So yes and no. Yes, because so every month about ish, you would meet with a group in your cohort called your inquiry group. And this is your group basically based on so every year you're giving an inquiry question, and your goal is to collect data throughout the year with this group in a particular way so that we can analyze it in a particular way and kind of inform our practice and learn more about how we show up in the classroom. And then also answering ultimately this question about like doing math and science, how does our identities like um, um, inform what doing math and science looks like in our classroom. And so throughout the year, like I said, you're going to be collecting data, and about once a month ish, sometimes it's maybe once every month and a half ish, where you're meeting with a small group of people, the same group of people throughout the year, and you are just analyzing your data, thinking about what it means, answering questions about it, with doing different protocols to learn more about what ways do you show up in the classroom and whether or not it matches your vision of like how you want to show up in your classroom. So I say yes and no because like there is some data collection, but like right now I'm not doing any Knowles homework. But when I have my next inquiry meeting in a month, I will have had to collect something from my classroom to bring to that meeting to then have a discussion about these are the things that I'm doing in my classroom. And here is what I wanted students to do. Here is what they did. Did it match what I wanted them to do? And does this mean that they're learning? And what are they learning? What am I asking them? So all of the questions that are very good questions for teachers to be asking and thinking about as they move throughout their practice. So I'm going to go with my answer is going to be yes and no. It's never work that should make you feel like you're having to do a crazy amount of extra, if that makes sense. I don't do a crazy amount of extra outside of the monthly meetings. But it's hard to explain until you experience it. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. Like low key, but okay, but here also it's low key a super low lift, right? Like as Sierra said, like I think, yeah, it's some things that you got to do, and this is not. I mean, if anything, this would be the gotcha thing. It's like it's not. It is. It's you are working, but because it's work that you know that it's for good, right? And so it shouldn't feel like, oh my God, like I'm like I have to do this because I'm being paid to do this. Like that's not ever the case. It's like we generate our own questions and we find the data that we think is valuable for our class, right? And so, if you're thinking that it's like, oh my God, I don't want to do this, like, well, then do you want to teach? Well, like that's really the question. Because like, it takes work to do teaching well, and it takes a lot of time. And I think it's well within the means of like what I think should be expected of any teacher for that matter, right? And if you're lucky at your school, you get to do that, then great. But like a lot of schools don't do that, and they don't get to do those kind of things. And actually, a lot of things that you end up doing in the meetings, you bring back to the school and make them do work. Yeah, but it's super meaningful. Yeah, so and I'll say I was probably one of the worst in terms of like finishing. Like I'm on the plane buying that $13 Wi-Fi to finish the homework and reading those documents, but also like they're very understanding and they're very forgiving of like not even forgiving, like they're just like very understanding. It's like, look, we know you're busy, especially in your first 3 to 5 years of teaching. Like it's so if you can, great. If you can't, then like we'll figure it out. There's never a moment when they probably should have made me feel bad about not doing any of the work. Like actually.
Gail, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, just to echo them, the work in between meetings is really like, what's a part of my teaching practice that I want to look at more closely? Let me pay attention to it and then talk about it with people from my cohort. And maybe read a really juicy article that blows my mind and makes me understand something about my teaching practice that I had never thought of that way before. It's a pretty the Knowles staff puts a lot of work into making sure that that's actually meaningful. They know that we're really busy and they want to make sure that anything that they're asking us to do is meaningful and worth our time. And I think they do a pretty good job of that. And like the others have said, you can really personalize it to what it is that you want to learn and get better at as a teacher. So I really like what Satoshi said, that this is work that we probably all should be doing as teachers, but it's better to do it with support and with members of your cohort.
Great. There's another question I think Jen is going to help us address. Have any members in the cohort presented at, or are there opportunities to present at ACS or other science/math related conferences with the data collected in inquiry groups?
Yeah, and so I'd like to address that in a couple of different ways. So the direct answer to that is yes. Fellows do find at various professional conferences are presenting data from their inquiry, lessons that they've learned, in those kinds of ways. And they might present on things that actually even aren't related to their inquiry as well. And there's a support structure at Knowles to be able to do that, from working with your TD to just figure out how to write the proposal, to present somewhere, to running through your proposal, like those kinds of things. We also, the way we structure the fellowship, there's kind of a support early in the fellowship to share out your findings and kind of fake present in some ways to your cohort members. Like, you're really talking about stuff, but it's really about learning how to present through presenting at our summer conference, which a couple of folks talked about being, and those summer conferences could be CWGs. I'm doing a presentation, a poster session. I think all of that was talked about. And some of that does come directly from inquiry data, what folks are learning about through their inquiry, and then using that also as a launching pad into regional presentations or national presentations. So for sure, our fellows do present at conferences of all different kinds and all different sizes at different points in the year on different things. And there's a big support structure there as well for that.
And I would also say, if you're thinking about it right now, we mean data really broadly too. So sometimes the data that we're talking about isn't necessarily the kind of stuff that you would present at a national conference. It might be, I'm going to pay attention this week to who talks in my classroom. I'm going to keep a seating chart and I'm going to keep track of who talks. And that might be the kind of data that isn't something you would present about at a national conference, but is really, really important to you specifically in your local context and to learning some sort of important knowledge about teaching. So I would say the flip side too, that if you're someone who's kind of freaked out by the idea of research and data in that sense, like, we define data really broadly. And so it runs the gamut all the way up to, NABT conferences, National Science Teaching Conferences, and, something that's just me and my inquiry group.
Looks like we did our job really well.
All right. If there are no more questions, I'll just talk a little bit about the application process. So to learn more about the application process or to start your application, please visit www.knowlesteachers.org/apply. If you have any questions that were not addressed in this presentation or on our website, feel free to contact Knowles via email for assistance. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.